Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Power of Man podcast. My name is Rory Paquette. I know you know that. I just really love to say that every once in a while and remind myself of how grateful I am to be sitting in this chair. Folks, if you're not out there doing what you're doing, I don't get to sit over here and do what I'm doing. And since we made the move to 5 days a week, you have absolutely come out of the woodwork to support us. Cannot thank you enough. And a couple weeks ago, when we moved to 7 days, yeah, I thought I was crazy. I think my wife probably thought I was a little crazy. But you folks showed up even stronger. And I don't know how or why you've done it. I think it's because we bring on such fantastic guests. But I'm eternally grateful for what you're doing out there. So thank you and keep it up. And we'll keep bringing you these powerful men to have these conversations with. If you're a friend of the program, and I know that you are, well, we got to pay some bills real quick. So hang on while I take a sip of my preferred beverage. Mm. Wow. That is such good stuff. And you guys know what we're drinking. That's right. It's Freedom Hill Coffee at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram. Go look them up, check them out. Deep, dark, rich, bold, and beautiful. Just like my wife. They brew a mean cup of joe. It's absolutely fantastic. And folks, they do all the right things for all the right reasons, and they support veterans, which you all know is incredibly important to us here at Power of Man. For all of you who are veterans out there, including my guest today, thank you so much for your service. We love you guys. We wouldn't be here without you. Folks, go check them out. Freedom Hill Coffee at Freedom Hill Coffee on Instagram and tell them Power of Man sent you. All right, it's all you got to do. I'm going to take one more sip of this so I can keep up with this young buck on the other side of the table from me today. He showed up a few minutes ago and he has been fire since he got on the set. So you guys are going to love this. You're going to love him and you're going to love his message today. Please welcome Army veteran, that's right, foster youth advocate, speaker, author of his memoir, Against All Odds. Please welcome Tristian Smith. Tristan, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing fantastic. It's an honor and a privilege to be here today.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Appreciate that. I love your story. I cannot wait to get into all of this. Before we start talking about the book or anything like that, man, tell everybody, who is Tristan Smith? What are you about? What brings you here today, man?
So again, my name is Tristian Smith. I'm a former Army officer, current graduate student at Johns Hopkins University, and author and child advocate. I'm someone that spent 10 years in the foster care system. Went on to graduate college multiple times. Uh, Served my country for almost 10 years as a military officer, and now I'm advocating for the same community that I once was a part of as a child. So, getting out, sharing my story about, humanizing the foster care system, rather than, just looking at it through data and numbers and negative statistics that, you may have seen from time to time. So putting a face to the community and trying to make the world a better place for those kids that are going through that system.
Nice. I appreciate that you're doing that, for that particular cause. I've had the great honor of speaking to some people about, foster care in the past. Some of them have been through it or have been hosts, things like that. But, I've never talked to anybody who has kind of had the experience you've had. And let me just make sure I have this right. Over the time you were in foster care, you were in 25 different homes and went to 13 different schools.
Yes, I lived in, it was probably closer to 30, but I definitely attended 13 different schools. I went to six elementary schools, five middle schools, and two high schools between the ages of 8 and 18. So
Wow.
that's more than a school a year, which is unprecedented even for kids, my military brats that are constantly moving, every 2, 3, 4 years. So a lot of instability, a lot of, moving back and forth, saying goodbye, and, a lot of issues that comes from all of that moving.
Right. Now, was this part of something that was happening through the system in terms of you moving? Were you not happy with where you were? Did you even get any say in that? I'm just curious because, like I said, I've never experienced anyone firsthand like you who has been through this sort of, moving and shaking and instability in the system.
Well, it stemmed from the trauma that I suffered prior to coming into the foster care system. I watched my mother die when I was 7 years old. I was beaten and abused by my aunt and uncle that I thought were taking me in to, prevent me from, going into foster care. But, there was some racial undertones, some discrimination between me, my little brother, and their kids. And to say they just, beat the hell out of us for the better part of a year before my teachers and principal got involved and had us placed in foster care would be an understatement. So a lot of the movement was due to anger issues, due to not having the right mental health care that, two kids, an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old probably needed at that time who had witnessed all and experienced all of these events. Um, and so it kind of just, whenever I didn't like someone or I didn't feel like I was being treated right, I would disrupt that placement. And so, my caseworker could be 6 o'clock in the morning and it could be 8 o'clock in the evening where my caseworker is coming to pick me up to take me to another foster home. So that was the routine for, most of my 10 years in the system.
Wow. First of all, let me just say I'm really sorry you had to go through all that, and I'm sorry for your loss with your mom. But also, kudos to you, man. I mean, seriously, like power to you because you own all of this. I mean, you embraced that and just said, "Hey, man, I'll tell you why I moved because of stuff I was dealing with."
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
at the time, obviously, you didn't know that this is kind of what was happening because you're just reacting emotionally. But was it during foster care at all, or did it take the service, for you to kind of understand that? When along your journey did you kind of figure out this is what I'm dealing with? Me, Tristan.
Um, I think when I became a teenager, I kind of, the behavioral issues, kind of stopped in a way. I mean, they were still prevalent, but there was one day where I had gotten suspended from school, and I was hanging out at the Department of Family and Children Services office with my caseworker. And walking around, I saw all these different posters that had all of these negative statistics about foster youth. Less than 50% graduate high school, less than 3% end up with a college degree. A lot of these kids end up in prison, they end up dead, they end up strung on drugs or homeless. And I knew I didn't want to be any of those four things. So what kind of accountability did I need to take from my choices, the people that I decided to surround myself with? What were things that were preventing me from being, great? In other words.
Yeah.
So, I had that little I guess come to Jesus moment, as some might call it. And at 16, I began focusing a little bit harder on my education. Because my caseworker used to pound it, used to beat it like a drum. Your education is going to be able to open doors if you do well. If you're an intelligent kid, but we need you to apply yourself. We need you to demonstrate that you can make decent grades so that you can get into college. Because once you get into college, you're on an equal playing field, just like everyone else, from the kids that grew up in, upper middle class households with two parents. You have the same opportunity of success as they do once you get on that college campus, but you need to work hard, while you're in high school. And
Yeah.
I think that's where so many kids fail, between those middle school and high school years. They don't have anyone trying to get them to apply themselves. And so, they're not able to get into college. And then if you don't have a college degree in today's society, your chances of being successful financially are very slim to none unless you decide to go to the entrepreneur route or you become a TikTok sensation, which is a very low possibility win in itself. But we're in a world of social media where everyone wants to be a social media star. So
Right. Yeah, for sure. My dance move on TikTok hasn't caught on yet. I don't know why. It's like old guy stomp. I don't understand why they're not.
Yeah, yeah, I'm right there with you.
Right. Our conversation we had before the podcast where we were talking about your advocacy, um, hearing more about your story now, a lot of these dots are really starting to connect. And I'm sure that the audience is going to hear this here in a second. But as you're going through this, and I mean, you're getting moved from home to home, from school to school, because you're having some behavior issues. You're acting out, right? Because of everything, all the trauma you had. Now, did they ever like sit down with you or have you go through some stuff with maybe a therapist or anything and try and get to the bottom of like why these issues are happening? Or was it just like taking care of everything on a surface level? He's a problem, move him.
So I had some, foster, well, out of the 25 to 30 foster homes that I was in, I talk about three of them in my book because there was literally I can name you three out of all the foster homes that I was in that actually looked at me as a human being and not just someone that were babysitting
Hmm.
because that was the culture of living in foster care in the late 90s, then the mid 2000s. But those individuals or those foster parents made sure that, they spoke to me about my trauma, asked me important questions about, what did I want to do? Do you have any goals? Because once you start to set goals, and you start to accomplish them, you start to release some of that trauma. Um, because you have someone that's there for you and not just there, with you to watch you become the worst version of yourself, you know.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you do that, then, my foster parents would be calling my caseworker to come and get me. So, I had, two or three foster families that just would not give up on me. They spoke life into me. They made sure that when I left my therapy appointments, they asked me about it. They asked me if I liked my therapist. Do I like the conversations that we're having? Is there anything that, can be done at home? And
Wow.
that was, those were the foster families that I did relatively well with. And, I had very few behavioral incidents.
Yeah.
So,
So you go through the foster system and then you decide I'm going to join the military.
well, I decided to go to college.
I see.
And
Okay.
so I enrolled at Fort Valley State University. It's a historical Black college and university out in Georgia. Um, And so what happened was my caseworker, uh, when she found out I wanted to go to Fort Valley State, she was like, my entire family's from Fort Valley, the city that my university was in. And so she decided she wanted to introduce me to her brother and his wife, who also graduated from Fort Valley State University. So they ended up becoming my mentors. And they were always asking me, what do you want to do with you know, what do you want to do with the degree that you earn here? And at that point, I was kind of like just floundering. I was changing my majors multiple times and was really inconsistent with my studies. And then my junior year, the ROTC program had a recruiting week there, on campus where they came on campus, they set up a rock wall, and they were trying to recruit for new ROTC cadets. And so I spoke to one of the instructors there. They set up a meeting with the professor of military science there, and we had a conversation. And I told him that I wanted to be an Army officer. So, once I graduated college, I commissioned as an officer. And so, the first 3 or 4 years, I served in the Georgia National Guard, where it was more of a reserve capacity. And then in 2017, I went and joined active duty. where, I spent time in South Korea, then Fort Hood, Texas, and then finally Fort Riley, Kansas. But it was during that time that, the military provided a sense of stability for me, both from a social aspect, a financial aspect, and I just enjoyed doing what I did, not just serving my country, but working alongside some of the best people in the world who took the same oath that I did. We all had a common goal to protect this country to the best of our abilities. And so that the military, it brought discipline. It taught me about teamwork. Whereas the foster care system, it was more about an individual aspect. What can I do to help me be the best version of me? Whereas the military embraces a teamwork aspect, a team mentality. And, you can't do anything alone in the military. Everything is too robust for one individual. So learning how to depend on people, how to interact with people, learning how to, um, you know, uh, develop relationships with people. So that's what the military taught me.
Nice. I love hearing positive military stories, because most of the stories coming out of the military are positive, but the only ones that you ever seem to hear about are the ones that get picked up on certain news channels and they're, negative, right? And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
they're the ones who make the headlines. But I love hearing positive
yeah.
stories.
So I was at Fort Hood actually when the Vanessa Guillen incident took place. I don't know if you were
Oh
familiar with
my
that.
goodness.
Yeah, so that was all that was happening while I was at Fort Hood,
Oh
Texas.
wow.
So, um, it was just one of those stories that unfortunately bad leadership that wouldn't take the complaints of that young woman seriously,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
finally, after being ignored several times, she was killed, unfortunately. And it sucked because we have really good leaders in the military, and then we have some really, really bad leaders in the military.
Sure.
And that's anywhere you go. The military is no different. You're picking people up off the street and hoping that they're not that these people are representing themselves in our military in the best capacity possible. And sometimes that just doesn't happen.
Sure. Now you were ROTC, you said.
Yeah,
So when you came out, you were second lieutenant?
second lieutenant. Yeah.
Right on. Okay. And so is that how you left the army too? I mean, were you
No,
considered
I
part
left. I
of
left as a captain.
that's what, okay. Because you mentioned that you were, an officer in the army. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. So you were part of leadership, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. And when you went in, you said, I want to be an officer. I want to be in leadership. So you wanted to lead even at that young age before you had even set foot in the army?
Yes, even though I didn't know a thing about leadership, even so the thing is, even during my time in ROTC, I was still not showing traits and qualities reflective of a leader. There were times where, we would need to be up for PT and I would not be there. There were days where we had training exercises where we had to go to, drive an hour and a half away for a weekend to do a training event, and I would not be there. So I actually had to be suspended from the ROTC program for a year because of my negligence, my irresponsibility, and just not knowing how to be a leader. So they were willing to bring me back, and that's when I did, much better, and I was able to graduate and whatnot. But even then, you know, um, I had adversity in college, so I had to fight through that. I had to prove myself that I was capable and worthy of leading someone.
Hmm. Okay. So you have the tumultuous life that you have up until you get into the military. And even in college, you were kind of back and forth and lacking discipline, like you said. You join the army, you want to lead, and it sounds like you wanted some stability and discipline also, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you do that, and then when you get in there, some of the same things happen, and you're still not quite there, and then they suspend you. So I guess first of all, how'd you react to that? And second of all, how did that help you? Because if you came back, then something good must have happened that came from you being suspended. Curious
So
about that story, man.
it was a chance to look at myself in the mirror and ask me, you've gotta, you've got to mature a little bit. Even at 2020, I was what, 23, 24. Um, and so even then, I had some growing up to do, So I had to look at myself in the mirror and say, hey, this is a great opportunity that you're squandering. They haven't completely taken it away, but this is time for me to reflect, to do better, improve my grades, and um, show and demonstrate that, I'm coming back as a more mature cadet, a more mature, more hardworking cadet, and I'm willing to show these younger cadets what it takes to, to go through the ROTC program.
Nice. When they first suspended you, was your first reaction like, hey, I'm fine, I'm out, whatever? Or was it like, I'm going to get back in this no matter what I have to do?
No, well, I accepted it because I mean, yeah, I did some really stupid stuff, but I'm also the type of person that takes accountability for what I do.
Okay.
So, I knew my head wasn't in the right place at that time, and I needed to come back with my head on straight. So I took it as, constructive criticism, constructive feedback more so than criticism, um, and decided to, once given the second opportunity, I wasn't going to squander it.
Nice. So, was there something that happened after that, like an event or a course or a mentor or anything? Or was it the actual act of being suspended and having to like come face to face with, I may lose this too? What was it that
Uh,
made you flip
I
the
think
switch
I
for
think
you?
having a talk with my mentors, having a talk with you know, just having talks with myself. Sometimes I sit in my room and I would be collecting my thoughts and I would, trying to understand why I'm doing these things. Is there a root cause for why I've made it to college, even though I've gone through this adversity and I'm still screwing up, Not a lot of foster kids can say that I was given an opportunity to go to college and then being presented with an opportunity to serve as a, United States Army officer.
Hmm.
That's only there's 1% of the population that serves in the military, and an even lower percentage that serves as military officers. So I'm ruining what could be a great story. This is my testimony that I'm building. And if I squander it, there's not much of a testimony to tell if, I'm continuing to mess up, and not take advantage of these opportunities.
I love your story. I love your accountability. That's a great lesson to everybody. Even with everything you went through, to still have that kind of sense of accountability is rare, really rare. And it's a blessing that you had it and that you were able to do what you did. So when you came back, you were bigger, better, stronger than ever. And was it pretty much just like, here I am, and then boom? Or, was it a little tough when you came back? Do you have a
I
little
think
more
my
adaptation to do?
entire I think my entire undergraduate was like one uphill battle. Um,
Yeah.
I would have a really, really good semester, and then the next semester, my grades would be kind of shaky. So, it's wild to tell this story now at 36. I'm working on my second master's degree.
Nice.
And I'm getting ready to I'll complete my second master's in December. And if you would have asked me an undergraduate if I thought I was going to go get a master's degree, I would have told you were crazy. Because I just lacked that discipline to focus and stay in my books. And so it took a lot of maturing. And thankfully, I had people that stayed in my corner, people that spoke life into me and did not give up on me.
Yeah.
So
That's wonderful that you had that. It's funny because before the interview, you and I were talking about David Goggins, about how we both, look up to him and read his stuff. And I almost feel like I'm talking to him right now.
No, I can't hold a candle to that guy. That guy he is one of one. There is no one like David Goggins. My goal would be to like he's one of if I don't pedestalize many people. Um but if there was one person that, I could meet in person and have a conversation with, he would definitely be one of them.
Yeah,
Just to like I listen to him speak and he speaks with, such conviction and he speaks and he doesn't care what other people think about him. And that's something else that I had to learn and take away from him.
yeah,
Not caring, as long as you're working on being the best version of you, you may end up losing friends along the way. You may lose family along the way. But your goal is to work on yourself individually and be the best version of yourself so that you can inspire others. And that's what I want to do.
nice. Well, it sounds like you're on that path now. The memoir, Against All Odds, is your story. Is this correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the reason that you're writing this, the reason you're putting this out there, I'm guessing is because of your advocacy, okay, and wanting to help, change the foster care system. Am I close? And why'd you write the
A
book,
little
and who's the
bit.
book for?
A little bit. So I wrote the book because as a kid growing up in foster care, I didn't, I was a voracious reader. Like I was always reading. And between, I guess during that time I was reading, Goosebumps, Animorphs, Harry Potter, um, all those different types of books. But I didn't see a lot of books written by foster youth about their stories in the foster care system.
Yeah,
And so now in 2025, we have quite a few of these now. But I wanted to write a book where, there may be a kid who's going through something and they have my book, and my book helps them make better decisions, or it helps them understand life, helps them see that they have a purpose in life, and that their purpose isn't to just flounder away, flounder through the foster care system and then end up, 19 and homeless, like statistics say that they'll end up. Your goal is to prove statistics wrong. Um, you know, uh, and so we do that by, sharing stories. I think it's important. I think every kid who's ever been in foster care should write a story as a way to kind of help pull up those younger foster youth to kind of show them, hey, I made it out of this. It sucked. The system, some of the people, they don't have your best interests at heart. But what you can do is you can instill discipline in yourself, take accountability of what you can control, and then you'll have better outcomes once you get out of the system. So that is why I wrote my book. And it just so happened that once I moved here to Nebraska, the state director of CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates. They're an organization that focuses directly on creating stable connections and relationships with foster youth. They work alongside the courts, they work alongside the caseworkers, the guardian ad litems, et cetera, to try to help bring stability to that kid's life. So my book, I gave it to the state director of CASA here in Nebraska, and she loved it. And she was like, "You would make a fantastic CASA." So I ended up going through the training. I became a CASA, and I'm still working with kids from my first case, from when I got the case in October. And so I'm also part of the foster care review board here, where one day of the month, we go and we look through 5 to 7 different cases that are assigned to my team. And we find ways and we make recommendations to the courts on how to best stabilize these kids, you know.
Hmm.
I wish that, someone had I wish I had a CASA when I was in foster care. Because, maybe if I'd have been assigned to CASA after my mom died and I was living with my aunt and uncle, maybe they would have caught the abuse a lot sooner. Maybe, a CASA could have helped prevent me from going to a foster home that really, shouldn't have been, certified to be a foster home. So it's all those small details behind the scenes that people don't see. And that's where CASA makes such a critical difference. So the sole reason of me writing my book was to tell my story. I've had people since I was in high school. I had English teachers telling me, you should write a book based on everything you've been through. Even now, at 17 years old, you've lived a life that could inspire the world. And now, after, graduating college, becoming a military officer, and getting ready to, get my master's degree from one of the most prestigious universities in the world, I feel like my story can be even further amplified. So it was just, me wanting to share my story, and hopefully, a couple of kids who are in the system will feel inspired by my story.
Nice. So you're working through your book, you're working through the kids' viewpoint, and you're trying to
Yes.
reach them. I got you.
Yes.
And so you're advocating for them through them with the
Yes.
book. Now, in addition to that, you're advocating in some way for change in the system. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so how are you doing that, and what sorts of changes are you looking for?
So I bring to light, the first off, bringing attention to the foster care system, because as prevalent as the foster care system is, I don't think the right eyes are being put on the foster care community. Those that can make financial decisions when it comes to money allocations to the system. Um, so, we have, they've here in Nebraska, they've privatized foster care. So you
Okay.
have all these different organizations that work under DHHS, or Department of Human and Health Human Department of Human Health Services. You have all these different organizations that report up to DHHS, but they're still trying to make money off of this. So um, for instance, I was sitting and listening at one of out of a it was a kind of like a panel where they were talking about how foster parents with that have kids with greater trauma and greater behavioral issues are getting paid more. But once those issues go away, their pay drops.
Oh, no way. I know
And
wherever you're going.
so,
Go
and
ahead.
so that's literally one of the things that's going on here in the state. Like you get paid based on the severity of the kid that you have in your home.
So you
So
have
if you
no
have a kid,
incentive to help
yeah,
them.
yeah. So
Wow.
it's it's like you're telling us you don't want to help the kids without telling us you don't want to help the kids.
Right.
Because you're only going to make a decent amount of money if you have A, multiple kids in your home, and then two, if you have multiple kids that are problem children, and you can't stabilize them like this because you're
Wow.
negatively impacting because negatively impacting the people that want to take care of these kids and improve their lives by reducing their pay. It's disgusting.
I
Um,
it
so
wow.
we have to find a way to where, we get rid of that system. I don't like it. And it was kind of like the system, it's the same system that I lived through, you know. So I went from being in a regular foster home where we would have 4 to 5 kids, and then I've lived in your group home facilities where it was like an orphanage. I've lived in what they call therapeutic foster care, where I was the only kid in the home. And then I've lived in uh these like transition living homes where as a teenager they kind of show you these different, living skills and how to be sufficient on your own as a young adult. So each of those different segments of the foster care system get paid differently because of the the criticality of the behavior of those kids.
Mm, my gosh.
So,
Wow.
you could have three kids that are perfect angels, but their parents were on drugs or they abuse the kids, and the people that take those kids in may not make nearly as much as someone who has a kid who has set fire, who was an arsonist at 11, 12 years old, or destroys property or hits, dogs and cats and other kids in the home, you know. So that's just one of the systemic issues that I see in the foster care system, and that's just here in Nebraska.
Wow. So you're working to try to change that by bringing attention to all of this through your book and through podcast guesting.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
My goodness.
absolutely.
My goodness. I have heard things where people have suspected stuff like that. You hear rumblings. I've never heard anybody from the system and who's working with it from the other side now actually say that out loud. So, I mean, you're like confirming what has kind of been out there a little bit,
Yeah.
you know?
And I was sitting in a
Ugh.
room with about 30 foster parents. And when the employees of the foster care facility, the people that outsource the foster care services, were going over this with them, like all the foster parents were like dumbfounded.
Yeah. I feel the same way right now. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. So
What in the world?
yeah. So it's still just as jacked up as it was when I got out in 2007.
Yeah.
So
All right. So you're working towards this. You're trying to figure this out. Now, is this something that you're trying to do, professionally? I mean, like, what's your master's degree going to be in?
Um,
What are you doing
so
there?
so I have a master's degree in emergency management.
Mm,
And so I do that for the Air Force.
I see.
And now my master's that I'm getting from Johns Hopkins is in intelligence analysis. So I'm looking to, transition eventually out of emergency management and into the intel field. Um, but, if, let's say I could be a professional speaker, where I go and do keynotes at different, child events and, I that type of thing. If I could, get enough of those, I wouldn't mind doing that full time for the rest of my life to go and talk to kids and teachers and educators, mental health, people that work in the mental health career field, and being able to, tell them about what we can do better, or at least provide recommendations, not tell them, but,
Sure.
provide recommendations, because a lot of the people that work with foster youth had to go to school to learn about the trauma that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
It's one thing to read a book about it, it's one thing to live through it and experience it and take that lived experience and utilize it to, help make the foster care system better.
Right.
And there aren't enough of people like myself who, get brought on to provide recommendations and to be asked these important questions, because you would think that, if you want to make the foster care system better, you would ask those who have already been in the system, um,
You
and
would think. Yeah.
gotten their experiences, especially those of us that were still able to find a decent amount of success, once they became a young adult. So that's being able to listen to a doctor who graduated from Harvard talk about, working and all the philanthropy work that you do with kids. That really doesn't mean much to little kids,
Yeah.
to 13, 14, 15-year-old foster kids who have been in double digit homes. They want to see someone who has been where they've been, walked in the shoes that they've walked, and been in those shoes and walked the path that they're walking.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm a great example of that.
For sure. And you're definitely leading by example, to say, hey, even though we all go through hardships, this is how you can overcome them and move
Yeah.
forward. So, again, man, power to you because I love what you're doing and the way that you're doing it. Let me ask you this. In order to have some of these, changes made, in order to make some changes that you think need to be made in the system, um, what can the average person on the street, like the listener of this program, what can these people do to help? accomplish that?
Um, so I think sitting in um finding your local CASA program. Every state, I think with the exception of two, um has a CASA program. So becoming a CASA advocate will allow you to sit in the courtroom during these court hearings with foster youth and be able to hear what's actually going on. The training that you go through will help you be able to empathize, and understand the trauma that foster youth are going through. I'm not saying that you have to have been a foster youth to work with foster youth. No. But what I'm saying is, um, being in places where you're behind the scenes of what's going on when the decisions are being made on where this kid is going, you know. Sometimes it's a CASA that stands up and says, "Hey, this kid should not go back to his drug addicted mother or father, and
Yeah.
they need to stay with the foster parent." You know, because that CASA has been routinely going in to do visits with the kid, trying to get an understanding of how they feel about where they really want to live, you know, because apparently ask the courts asking the kid what they want is completely out of the question, and nobody's thought of that.
Right.
So, the Casas maintain a very close relationship to the kid. Um, and they get a chance to understand what's going on in the head of that kid, and gets to seek out, educational mental health resources if they need if they haven't been to the dentist in a couple of years. You get to help make recommendations that lead to these decisions being made in the best interest of these kids. So I would say, becoming a CASA volunteer, becoming part of the foster care review board. I think every state has a foster care review board, where you get to go and you get to actually read through the case files for each of these kids. You get to read all the trauma that these kids are going through. And then you get to try to make recommendations for the stability of those kids. So
Yeah.
there's always something you can do.
Nice.
Being a mentor to a foster youth, if you attend church and you know someone that has, foster youth, offer to be a mentor to them. You may not want to be a foster parent, but there are definitely other ways that you can contribute positively to the lives of these youth.
Nice. Do you feel like there's a shortage of foster parents, or do you feel like there's enough of them?
I feel like there's a shortage of good foster parents.
Nice. I like the qualification. There's a shortage of good foster parents.
Yeah, there were
Yeah.
plenty of foster parents when I was, when I was in, but they were all very mediocre. Most of the time, the only time I was being spoken to was when it was time to wake up, time to go to school, time to take a bath, or time to eat. Those were the only conversations that were had in a lot of the foster homes that I lived in, and it sucks.
Wow.
Because you feel like you're being shooed off into your room to be out of the hair of the foster parents while they do whatever it is that they're doing. So there's no development that you're getting from the foster parents.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
but yeah, there's definitely a shortage of good quality, caring, and empathetic foster parents.
Nice. Nice. I love what you're doing. I love the book, the whole bit. And I mean, you're doing all this while you're working a full-time job, brother. I mean, to top everything else. So,
I'm busy. I'm
yeah,
busy. We
it's
have 168 hours in a week, so my job is to make the most of each and every one of them.
see, there's that David Goggins again. I'm telling you right now.
Yeah.
I love that. I really do. You're talking about a topic. I mean, you and I could talk about this topic probably for hours with all of the different things that, occur within the system and everything else. I think you've given everybody a really good idea of where there's some issues, that there are issues, and that the help is needed. Um, where can folks go to get your book, to find out more about all this, that type of thing?
So, my book is it's just about everywhere that you can buy books online. So your Books a Million, your Barnes and Nobles. Specifically, I direct people to Amazon because
Okay.
you'll probably get it a lot quicker. I know a lot of people have Amazon Prime, so you'll get it in a day or two. Um, but you can follow me on LinkedIn. Just type up my name just as you see it. And if you're wanting to have a conversation with me, we could set up a Zoom call. I love doing talking to people about, the foster care system. I'm still, even though I have all of this lived experience, I'm still maneuvering my way through the foster care community space where I'm trying to reach, the top figureheads who can make decisions,
Mm. Yeah,
and trying to use my voice and trying to, present myself in the best way as possible so that, I could get, a seat at the table to help these kids. There are people out here with money that want to help with foster youth. We just, need to figure out a way on how best to distribute that money.
nice. All right. Listen, I appreciate everything you brought here today, man, and bringing this up and putting it out there for everybody to really consider, telling your story, how it goes along with it. I want to make sure that I'm doing it, due justice. So, um, what I'm going to ask you as we kind of close things out and wrap things up, I want to throw it to you for a minute, and I want to say, Tristan, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to make sure we get out there? Is there anything that we talked about and maybe you want to drive home a little more? Or maybe just a final thought or leave behind for the audience. I'm going to give you the mic, give you the floor for the last minute or two. The floor is yours, man.
Um, for anyone that's out there, and this could apply to the veteran community, this could apply to the foster care community as well. I think it's important that we share our lived experiences because, some being someone that served in the military and someone who's also been a foster youth, those are two separate but very you know, how do I say this? It's very unique experiences. So it's great to share those with people who may not be familiar with what it's like to serve in the military or what it's like to be a foster youth. Because there are certain myths, that need to be debunked within each unique story. There are I wrote my story to as a way to present a multifaceted view of the foster care system. I wanted to, present my lived experience so that others could, if you want me to come and speak to, your foster youth, or if you want me to come speak to your organization that works with foster youth to better understand foster youth. Um, I feel like the youth that have already gone through the system are the ones that can do the best job of helping to drive legislative reform. Um, and hopefully through my personal storytelling, I can help with, transforming some of these inept systems that are failing our foster youth.
Nice. Great close, man. Really great close up. I appreciate that. Appreciate everything you brought today. Um, Army veteran, foster youth advocate, as you've heard today, speaker, author of his memoir, Against All Odds, which can be found on Amazon. We'll have all the links to all this stuff in the show notes. Tristian Smith, brother, thank you for coming today, telling your story, putting all this out there. I really, truly, it's been great hearing it and great getting to know you, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a
Yeah,
pleasure.
yeah, pleasure's mine. Folks, this has been another episode of the Power Man podcast. And the reason that we bring powerful men like this on here with such powerful stories is because, we are behind you in your mission to become, a better provider, a better protector, a better leader tomorrow than you are today. Uh, to become a better father, better husband, a better man tomorrow than you are today. And the reason that we do this is because we want to make sure that, through these stories and through meeting these people, that you realize that, you can do it too, that you matter, that you have value. And at some point, you just have to believe it. Until next time.